Good morning. On behalf of Auburn University, the University of Alabama, and our AI Ethics Iron Bowl sponsors, welcome to, we're going to call this the bronze medal match. I don't like consolation, so I get to say what I want. I have the microphone. My name is Lee Laskin. I'll be your moderator for this match. Glad to have you all here today. The event brings together students, scholars, and practitioners to engage thoughtfully with complex ethical questions surrounding artificial intelligence. Before we begin, a few of the expectations. Teams from this point forward, no substitutions, no consultation of outside sources, no cell phones, no tablets, nothing. Coaches and audience members, you are welcome as observers, but you may not communicate with the teams during the round. At this time, I'd like to invite our distinguished judges to introduce themselves.
Hi there, I'm Julie Stuckey from BCD Travel.
Hello, Sherry Barnes from Diversified Energy. I'm the Director of IT Governance, Risk, and Compliance.
Hello, I'm Darby Westfall. I have a consulting company called Leapfrog Systems here in Birmingham.
At this time, we will do a coin toss. Is somebody supposed to call it, or is each side already identified for each team? Okay. Show that I'm not showing any favoritism. Go ahead and show it.
Heads.
Heads.
Okay, the heads.
And I guess we are designating the brains as heads.
Yes.
It is tails.
Yes, I'm saying heads.
So I believe Auburn, you get to choose. You would like to present first or second? Second. Okay. So Auburn will be designated as Team B, Alabama as Team A. At this time, we will pull out the first case. For you in the audience, I believe you can scan the QR code up on the screen there, and that should be able to pull it up for you on your cell phone. And I guess for the judges as well. I don't know. Oh, you got, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Katie has multiple copies for you. All right. This is case number 3. Whose muse is it anyway? The nominations have just been announced. Among them is Lila Ardent, nominated for Best Actress for her role in a widely praised independent film. Critics describe her performance as precise, emotionally complex, and technically remarkable. There is one complication. Lila Ardent does not exist. She's a fully AI-generated actress, created through a collaboration between a university research team and the film's director. Her performance was produced through generative video systems, trained models, and iterative prompting. In the days following the nomination, the Academy begins internal discussions. If Lila wins, who receives the award? The research team argues that they built a system that made the performance possible. Without their model, there would be no actress. The director disagrees. He argues that he selected Lila, shaped her scenes, and refined the prompts that produced the final performance. In his view, the performance reflects the world he constructed through direction, pacing, and emotional framing. The screenwriter also makes a claim in which Lila's performance emerged. Every gesture, tone, and emotional arc was first encoded in the text. Without that narrative structure, there would be nothing for either the system or the director to shape. Others within the Academy raise a different concern. Acting awards have always recognized the performer alone. Cinematographers, editors, writers, and directors all shape what appear on screen. Yet the award goes to the actor. If Lila cannot receive the award herself, then no one should receive it on her behalf. Additional proposals emerge. One suggests hiring a human actress to stand in as Lila at the ceremony to accept the award as her physical representative. Another suggests creating a digital version of the award to be presented on screen. Since Lila exists only in digital form, both attempt to resolve the gap between existing rules and a non-human performer, and both challenge what it means to receive an award. These tensions echo recent controversies in visual art. In 2022, an AI-generated image, Theatre de Opera Spatiale, won first place at the Colorado State Fair after its creator used Midjourney to generate and refine hundreds of outputs before printing the final image. Judges later said the result would not have changed what had they known AI was involved. In 2024, a photographer submitted a real flamingo photograph to an AI image category, won, and was later disqualified when the truth was revealed. In one case, AI assisted work won without disclosure. In the other, human work was mistaken for AI. In music, similar questions have emerged. The Beatles song Now and Then used machine learning to isolate John Lennon's voice from an old demo, allowing the surviving band members to complete the track decades later. Around the same time, a fully AI-generated artist, Breaking Rust, released a song with a synthetic but convincing vocal performance that reached the top of the Billboard Country Digital Song Sales chart. One case used AI to recover a human voice. The other created a performer who never existed. If Lila Ardent wins, the Academy must decide what exactly is being recognized when performance has no single human center. The technology, data, and researchers who built the system, the filmmakers who shaped the context and moment-to-moment performance that audiences judge, or the performer herself as a distinct recipient, even if she exists only as a digital presence. For audiences, the difference may already be difficult to locate. After all, even Emma Stone's status as a person is something most of us have to take on faith. Not sure why she's catching strays. Teams, the question you should both consider is, sorry, you wrote it at the bottom of this, didn't you? What should the Academy do next is the question for you to consider. Team A, you have 2 minutes to confer, and then a 10-minute presentation. Alabama, it's time to start your presentation, please.
I just wanted to say first, thank you guys so much for being here. Very excited to talk about this case. When we're thinking about what the Academy should do in this scenario, we believe that this AI actress cannot be considered in the same category as a Best Actress. So we believe that she is the work and the background that goes into Lila Ardent is inherently different skills than that is being rewarded for the Best Actress role. So we would like to be able to expand our understanding of basically AI art and AI actresses as opposed to real human effort. So we want to look at that through the lens of utilitarianism, specifically maximizing goodness for the most people that we can. And we want to look specifically at fairness for this, fairness to the public, fairness to innovation, and fairness to creators. So I want to pass this down to Tomas to talk about some specifics about art and specificity in general.
We would like to posit the question, ultimately, that what is it that we reward when we reward art? What is it that we are considering? We would like to answer that in saying that we recognize components of hard work culturally, artistic quality, and emotional resonance that art is able to provide by being something that the lived experience of the artist is able to give to the audience representing it. Because of that, we want to recognize that AI art lacks certain components of that same cultural system. There is no one person that is entirely dependent on the quality of AI art. It is multiple components that all come together to ultimately make AI art either good and worthy of merit or bad and not worthy of merit. And it is in establishing a criteria for that merit that we want to be able to rightfully credit in a utilitarian way all the people who deserve to be credited and all the people whose work and hard effort came into creating the art and establishing the art as such a tool in such a emotional resonant system. I believe I'd like to pass it on to,
Thank you for that. So I know we're talking about what the Academy should do, but I think a lot of us have the question if an AI actress is ethical and right. I think that really looks at how it's presented. So I want to speak on transparency of using the AI, and that relates to the fairness of the public. So when you're creating an AI actress or AI art like this, it's important that you make the public aware that it is AI, at least not presenting it as your own, because that is deception. And it takes away the general public's autonomy to make their own decisions about the art and their perceptions of it. A lot of you may be aware of the Milli Vanilli lip syncing scandal. That was presented as their own work. And when it came out that that was not their own voice, a lot of people felt betrayed. A lot of people felt deceived, and that was very unfair to everybody listening and everybody else who was winning awards for music, everyone in that area of work. So as long as we are, at least in a movie, putting in the credits that this is AI and people who were behind the AI, that makes it fair to the public and is transparent, and people are able to have access to the information. So that is where the AI can be ethical. So then I'll pass it off to you.
Yeah, and kind of to expand more on that idea of like how we view the role of AI in art and in creativity specifically, we think that AI is good for innovation, but it shouldn't replace art in itself, right? We're not saying that we want AI movies or solely AI actors, but also that AI is good to enhance performances or to change already existing things. And to use this couple of cases, one of them is Adrien Brody, who won the Oscar for The Brutalist 2 years ago. And there was a big scandal with his Best Actor win because it found out that some audio engineers used AI in the movie just to affect his Hungarian accent. He had Hungarian family. He knew the language very well, but the language is something that you can't fully get completely correct unless you're a native speaker. And so they just used some AI technology to help add as vowel sounds to his accent. It was done in post, and it really all it did was create a better performance overall. And so this idea that when AI is used as a tool, when it's used as innovation, and when it's used to subtly enhance art, instead of changing the meaning of it, then it's a good use of AI, and it's a use of AI that can enhance the output of art. And even looking at the Academy stance on it, the Academy said that they didn't take the use of AI as negative or positive in evaluating his work. They try to take the use out of it. So it's basically AI is used to help the audience kind of experience things better and almost to create people, make the movie feel more inclusive for those who might have spoken the native language and kind of recognized how the accent was. And then kind of going more into AI and innovation, looking at, as used as an example, the Beatles song, Now and Then, right? This wasn't AI creating art. This wasn't AI making art. This was AI making art possible, taking something that we thought was lost. So basically one huge, incredible part and bonus for AI is that we can use AI to help recover lost media and use AI to inspire people to create more. The Beatles didn't use the AI to make the song, they used it to listen to the song, and then they created the song themselves with their own work and their own instrumentation. And to kind of talk more about like this use of AI and AI in art, we have Jackson.
Yeah, so with the major concern with AI is going to be transparency for the artists that go into it, as well as the training data has historically been rather opaque and in some ways kind of stealing their art. So what we really like is, in addition to the transparency of when the AI is used in the movie, we would like some transparency on how that AI model was trained. How was the training data acquired? Was that fair to the artists? How were the artists compensated? All of that is what we would like to see. So going back to what the Academy should do as well, I think they should really enforce some restrictions or rules on how the AI can be trained and what the training data can be derived from. And then another concern the Academy raised was, how does someone accept the award if they're digital only? And I would like to bring up the precedent.
3 minutes.
That there's actually a VTuber named Iron Mouse who, for health reasons, cannot attend events in person and actually streams through a completely digital persona. And historically, when she's won awards at things like the VTuber Awards or the Streamies, which are both basically the Oscars of VTubing, which is streaming with an avatar, or streaming Oscars, basically, she has had one of her friends carry her on an iPad to accept the award. So I'm going to pass it back to Ansley for more and closing up.
All right, yeah. So while we believe that we want to clarify, I think, that we don't want to take away from human art, right? So that's kind of what we're thinking here when we say we want to make a new category and make new understandings for this AI art, because AI is obviously a huge burgeoning area right now, and we want to use it everywhere we can. So I don't think that's necessarily invalid or incorrect, but we need to make sure that while we're furthering this technology, we're not at the same time diminishing from human voices and human creativity and human choices. So that's why we hope to, let the Academy make changes. We want to say, like with what Sam discussed with the Brutalist and the changes in the Academy, or the Academy's sort of, what's the word for it? Flexibility, I suppose. It's sort of reminds me of what we think of when we talk about current human copyright law with AI. Is that the Academy sort of emphasized the fact that this was not AI on its own; it was AI for the human betterment, I suppose, of the performance. And so, what we currently have recently decided with AI and copyright is that the human involvement.
1 minute.
The human involvement is what's relevant and important here. That AI works, or AI art, without any human involvement. So if it's just a random prompt, and it's in this instance, if the screenplay was written by AI and without any human involvement in the AI actress, that wouldn't really be valid in the sense in our current understanding. But since we have the screenwriter, and since we have at least people behind the prompts and behind the prompting, sort of working with that, we believe that it does not entirely take away from the human aspect and human understanding. And so that's why we just wish to emphasize the differences while still acknowledging the advancement of this technology and the use of this technology that I think can be helpful, hopefully, in the future to many industries, really. So I don't know if anyone has any super closing remarks.
No, just to say at the very ending, we've seen this before with the use of CGI creations. The Academy adapts to,
And that is time.
so we want to do the same.
Thank you, Alabama.
Thank you.
Auburn, you have, I'm sorry, 2 minutes to confer. And during this time, judges, if you will score Alabama's presentation.
Like,
Okay, Auburn, if you will begin your commentary, please. Starting now.
All righty. Thank you, Team A, for your presentation on this essential ethical question we have at hand. This is case 3, whose muse is it anyway? We really appreciate how you came at it from an artistic perspective. Analyzing the essential artistry of AI, that was fascinating. And we want to dive a little deeper and kind of shift the perspective to the question, what should the Academy do next? You briefly mentioned utilitarianism, so we kind of want to dive deeper into your framework on that and flesh out these arguments a little further. I'll pass it on to Will.
Yeah, so great argument, y'all. One of the big things I want to point out is y'all's framework. You talked about a utilitarian framework, and yet I didn't hear y'all really incorporate it. And in this case, a utilitarian framework is the most amount of good for the most amount of people. And so in this case, a utilitarian framework would honestly say, replace all the actors with AI. I mean, it's the same performance. In this case, Lila might win an award for her technical performance. It's cheaper. It's way more cost effective for a studio to just generate an AI model than actually have to pay an actor. Directors don't have to deal with egotistical AIs. I mean, you're not going to hear an AI talk back to you the way that, Edward Norton might. This is a textbook case where utilitarian perspective says that get rid of the actors and just replace them with AI. It'll make things a lot easier. And so I think I would really like y'all to respond to that and see if that makes any sense. And with that, I'll pass it on to Hannah.
Yes, thank you so much for your presentation. The question that I have is about these proposed AI categories. So your response to what the Academy should do next was create a separate category for AI. So in those categories, who would get that credit? Would it be the AI itself, coders, directors, screenwriters? What would that new category or categories look like to you guys?
And now I'll kind of portray the question similar to Hannah's, but focused on the use or the generation of AI based on past human actions and data. I'd say as you mentioned, Emma Stone got some slack in the back, but her former acting in movies beforehand could have been used in the AI's, generation of data that kind of created Lila's performance herself. And I'd also say just a few weeks ago, Matthew McConaughey and Timothy Chalamet were talking about this exact issue where they were saying they might have to, get trademark their image or trademark their voices so they can be prepared for the future if this were to happen with a film studio trying to take advantage of their likeness and use that in the future. And I'll pass it to Eli.
Thank you, Trip. So I just wanted to look into, y'all spent a lot of time talking about the importance of the lived experience of the actress, such as Emma Stone compared to Lila. And I wanted to ask and see what y'all's opinions was on what the difference is between that and the lived experiences of all the inputs that go into making the AI possible. So the developers who created the AI, they have lived experiences. The actors who the AI learns from, actors and actresses, they all have lived experiences, and so do the directors and the screenwriters. So I just wanted to ask about what is the essential difference between the lived experience and that?
Another question that we have for you is, where do you see the line of this is a human performance versus this is an AI performance or AI creation? So, for example, using the Beatles example, if John Lennon were to not have ever existed and the Beatles wanted to create an AI to be a fourth or fifth person in their band, would that still count as an AI generated performance since there's still four people, or would that be a human performance? And what do you kind of view as the line between AI and human creation?
Oh, we hope that was a little clarifying as far as what our questions are to dive deeper into our argument here of whose muse is it anyways. We would love to hear answers to your questions. We would appreciate
1 minute.
your analysis. And with that, we cede our time.
Alabama, you have 2 minutes to confer. Judges, please score the commentary from Team B, Auburn. Alabama, we are ready for your response.
Yes.
Go.
Thank you guys all so much for your questions. Yeah, they definitely really made me think a lot more about pretty much everything. But I wanted to start about with Eli's question about lived experience and sort of what's the difference there. I think I would say that lived experience of actresses is, well, okay, let me start the other place. Lived experiences of the work who put the people who put the work into the AI. That's a lot of lived experiences, right? There's so much different work, which is also part of the problem with this case, which is, who does it go to? Whose work gets credited first and foremost the most? So I think I would say that it's sort of a jumble of lived experiences, right? And that doesn't take away from the fact that those lived experiences are a thing, but it can get blurry, I think. And it's also a bit of a step removed almost. It's run through this program, this AI. There's not almost as direct of a human input. And then also there's also a bias that goes into sort of AI and when you're working with AI. Like there's this art piece someone did that they used AI in order to highlight the erasure of identity. And the artist, what they did is they trained an AI voiceover on one of the artists who he was Bengali Indian. He had a Bengali Indian accent. And though it was trained on his voice, the voiceover ended up being more of just American general accent. So just highlighting the fact that sometimes what AI is trained on overall and all is the majority, which tends to be not always what you're trying to represent, maybe. So I wanted to pass it on to Addison.
Thank you. So I wanted to talk about your utilitarianism questions. First, I want to touch on what is the purpose of work? Why do we work? For the actors, they get a lot of fulfillment out of these roles, a lot of joy, and I think so do the directors and the screenwriters and everybody involved in the movie. If we're just replacing everybody with AI, purpose and the joy and the meaning is taken away from all of the actors because they're not involved in it as much. The directors, it might be easier, it might be cheaper, but they're not having those relationships with the people. I think in our world right now, that's especially important, is to have like human interaction, human relationships, and those last a long time. And then also for the viewers, we all have our favorite actors. We all have our people that were saying, "Oh my gosh, this person's in a new movie. I want to go see it." If it's just we're having everything replaced with AI, you're not having that same joy and meaning from your work and what's being produced from it. And I also just want to say ethics is all about people and trying to treat people correctly. And I think replacing everything with AI would take all of that away. So I'm just going to touch it to Thomas.
Yeah, and to add further to Addison's point, we find that a utilitarian like ethical framework would most prefer there being equal sort of good for every member involved. And what was described as being a good for the directors and a good for mayhaps the production company that starts these films and that develops these films is not a universal good for the actors, nor is it a universal good for the audience who comes into these movies with expectation of being represented by a lived experience of someone else who they can empathize with. AI, much like what Ainsley was saying, it isn't a one lived experience. It is a mass of lived experiences that are conglomerated together.
1 minute.
Create a representation of what the general society believes. That is not the same thing as one artist putting their own lived experience into their specific work.
All right. And just to wrap some things up and go over some other points you guys had made, one of the things you talked about was who should accept the award, right? What the category is. I mean, we look at it with like CGI, right? When CGI came out, it's not like Optimus Prime accepted the award for the CGI effects, right? It's the team behind it. And in the same way, there's a team behind AI. So it'd be the people involved, it'd be the coders, it'd be the script writers, and they'd accept it as a collective. Another thing we want to touch on really quickly is this idea of framework. And you guys have challenged us to look at it, not just from utilitarianism, but like, as Addison pointed out, almost this ethics of care, right? How important interpersonal relationships are in art. So in general, just to wrap it up, one big thing we kind of want to hone in and like make the big point is that we believe that this should be given, there should be a separate category so we can highlight interpersonal relationships and how important art is to humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Judges, take a moment to please score the response, and then we will move to the Q&A section. Judges, are you ready? Okay. All right, we'll move to the question and answer. You'll have a few seconds to confer when you're replying to the judges. I'll push you along if you take too long.
Yes.
Well, we want to congratulate you all. You've done a great job thinking on your feet in really just a few minutes. So good. Well done. My question is, when you think about the awards, I want you to focus for a minute on what the awards are for, what the purpose of the awards are. And I like the idea that there's probably a separate category necessary for AI. But the trick, the question, the conflict here is, at what point does a film or a role or a job fall into that new category? So you may have some amount of humanness going on in the film with a little bit of AI layered in. When do you cross the line and it becomes an AI category versus a human category?
So it's a very good question. It's a very interesting line to talk about. And I think one thing is kind of that idea that there should be a category almost for use of AI in film, right? So that way that to a certain extent, you kind of have to regulate how much has AI impacted the performance. This idea of if I take AI out of the film, is it the same film, right? So when people use it as technical tools or people use it to kind of like enhance special effects or to enhance script writing, that could go under special effects, right? AI can be used in special effects. So what we specifically want to talk about is when AI is either used to create a majority of what you watch or create a performance. And I think, Tomas, if you can expand more about that.
Of course. We believe also a new industry standard in a lot of like artistic fields is a 30% rule, which is an idea that if more than 30% of the work is AI, it has to be credited as such. And we believe that also can work as a pretty formidable way of describing that line and where that line gets crossed. Similarly as well, the fact that when you use AI, you can also have a transformative way versus a generative way. A generative way being that you're simply prompting it and it creates everything from the bottom up, like to the very top, or a transformative way, which can enhance already existing human components and already existing human actions, which we believe that transformative way would be the more likely the one that would be considered outside of that category of being used as entirely AI or being used as a AI classification.
I just want to say that's definitely a good question because it's clear that that's kind of what we're trying to figure out right now, like especially with how the current copyright laws, like I talked about, where it's like we're trying to find that line between where we can consider it human involvement, like how much human involvement is needed for it to be something human and something that can have ownership of its ideas or of their ideas. So I think that's really like something we're really trying to figure out. So obviously we can do what we can, but not to say that we shouldn't think about it, but the point is we're thinking about it. That's what I'm trying to get at.
And then really quick, you asked about the purpose of awards. I think that just comes back to the gathering of the people that were involved in a celebration and then back to those relationships that were built. It's really just, they put a lot of hard work into these movies and their art. And I think awards, aside from just recognition and like getting to see your favorite actors on TV, getting recognized, it's afterwards they say, we did a really great job. It's that positive, like bonding, team bonding, and just those relationships and that gathering that's really important in this day and age. Thank you.
So I want to expand a little bit on your point around the actors themselves. So for the best actor aspect, right? Like from an ethics standpoint, what do you think they feel when they say, "Oh, now I have an AI, in my category, and I've poured my life into this role"? So kind of expand on how those ethics would go about them standing up against the AI tools.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really what we want to highlight when we say we don't want to diminish like human actors, because like we said, it's a very different effort and skill set. Like how we have different categories for animated movies versus real life or whatever movies, where it's like there's different effort and different work that goes into that. So it doesn't feel fair when we're talking about that utilitarianism. It doesn't feel fair to the human actors to be compared to that on such a degree to an AI actress like that. So that's why, I think we should emphasize that there's different skill sets. And while there's skills that go into both, it's something different. And I think, no.
I think one important thing too to talk about, you're talking about ethically speaking, and I think an ethical framework that really works with this specifically is the ethics of care. Addison talked a lot about it earlier without saying the name, but it's kind of this idea of interpersonal relationships and placing an importance on interpersonal relationships and how that is ethical and how there's ethical that lies in it. And so one of the biggest things is these actors will feel hurt if they're competing against things that don't represent themselves. I mean, we talked about earlier how AI is kind of a jumbled of lived experience, right? It's not a singular lived experience. And so even on a sense, it's kind of harder to evaluate AI against human standards. It's two different competitions. It's two different criteria, two different factors. And so in that way, it kind of undermines the actor's work because you're comparing apples to oranges here. And that's another reason why we think ethically speaking, it's better to have two separate categories. And I know Jackson has more to say.
Yeah, so I really just wanted to add in, going off of what Ansley said, that there is effort that also goes into these AI actors to train them and to develop the underlying models. And by crediting the AI actor instead of some of the work that has been underlying in that and the development work that's gone into the AI, I think we are kind of missing a group that we should be crediting. And now to hand it off to Tomas.
Yeah, and furthermore, we would like to also bring up the fact that, as the other team discussed, it is much cheaper and a much more preferable option for a lot of companies to be able to pay AI actors and to be able to have that economic directive in order to not have to deal with, again, divas, and like the general difficulties that acting already has. But however, this is if we continue to allow it to be the same category, we're setting people up against these interests that are beyond just the merit of art. And that is the very reason why we want to be able to maintain that merit of art and maintain that difference in categories.
Okay, so my question is, so there's a lot of value here, right, that's at stake at this. What do you think is taking priority for this case? Like if you think about fairness, autonomy, maybe safety, dignity, accountability, like what do you feel is the underlying value that you're fighting for with this case?
I mean, I think something is really just the value of human creativity. I know we've been throwing that around a lot. But I think there's something about the fact that I don't know about everyone, but I personally, if I'm ever asked, what is art? How do you define art? I will do everything I can to not define it, to not give it a definition. Because to me, art feels something that is very subjective and that is very, now it's a career, obviously, with actresses and there's, painters. But I think a lot of it is that just emotional aspect that goes into it and that it's something for us, for ourselves. I asked a lot of my friends actually, like why they do art. For someone said for character design or just something to do with my hands or just to get the creative juices flowing or stuff like that, where it's like it is something human and that we just do, right? A lot of people, I'll doodle while I'm listening to people to help myself focus. So I think it's just the human creativity at its core is something that we want to make sure we're valuing. And then the human creativity that goes into AI too, like we said, because there is some of it sometimes, hopefully.
Yeah, I also just want to say the ability to express yourself in the way that feels authentic to you is such a pillar of human experience. And I think trying to protect that for all the actors and actresses who aren't AI is really important because that's where they feel most fulfilled in their expression. And that's how they feel they are being authentic to themselves. And I think that's really important also to highlight.
Yeah, and also more than just the actors as well, the audience. We connect with certain performances, we connect with certain great performances because of the emotional resonance and because of the ability for us to empathize with what is happening and to empathize with having felt feelings like this before. That expression of the self is very important for that. That expression of self that it stays individualized and stays within a single mind that can then be exported and shown to others. The AI cannot replicate in that same sort of way the ability for one to express your own self and express what you believe in entirely by yourself.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
At this time, judges, please complete your scoring for the first half of this round. And when you are ready, we will proceed to the second half. Okay. Alabama, ready? Auburn, ready? Okay, we're going to move on to the second half. That's yours, ma'am. That's fine. Okay, one moment. Okay. Team B, Auburn. This is case 7, betting the outcome. In the lead up to a mayoral election in Fairview, local news outlets began displaying odds from online prediction markets alongside traditional polling. When the price for the incumbent mayor, Elena Cruz, rose, coverage described her as the frontrunner. When it dropped, headlines shifted to a tightening race. Daniel Kim, a political consultant working on a housing referendum, used a campaign platform that combined prediction market data with AI-driven outreach. The system analyzed voter files, past behavior, and demographic data to identify persuadable individuals that generated tailored messages designed to influence turnout and opinion. The platform updated continuously. When market odds shifted, its models recalibrated, flagging specific precincts and voters as newly decisive. It generated new messaging in response, testing variations and optimizing delivery based on engagement and predicted impact. The same signals used to forecast the election were now feeding directly into systems designed to change it. When the referendum's odds dropped sharply after a series of large bets, the platform responded within hours. It identified voters whose behavior could meaningfully affect outcome probability and produced targeted messages emphasizing urgency and risk. The interface displayed market movements alongside projected changes in turnout, linking financial signals, predictive models, and behavioral influence. Later, Daniel encountered an online forum where users discussed placing large bets to move market prices, then using AI tools to amplify those signals through targeted outreach. If you move the line, one post read, you move the narrative, then you move the vote. Daniel cannot confirm whether this activity was connected to the shift he had observed. Still, he recognized that his own use of the platform followed the same structure. The system treated market movement as both information and input, something to interpret and something to act on. His organization had also discussed placing bets in the same market to signal momentum and potentially influence coverage. At the same time, reports surfaced of individuals with financial stakes in prediction markets attempting to pressure journalists to alter reporting that could affect market outcomes. Daniel opened the platform dashboard. Market odds, AI-generated messaging strategies, and projected changes in voter behavior appeared side by side. The system did not distinguish between forecasting an outcome and shaping it. It optimized for both. For the first time, Daniel paused, unsure whether he was interpreting the signal or participating in its construction. Your question, what should Daniel do next? You have 2 minutes to confer. Auburn, please present.
Alrighty, Team B here to present this case 7 question that we've been proposed. What should Daniel do next in analyzing the betting the outcome case here? You all heard it a minute ago, and we kind of want to discuss the ethical tensions at hand here. The main one that kind of stands out to us is that there's a tension between predicting the outcome of an election and shaping it, and those lines begin to get blurred once you introduce AI into the question. Once you get to use Daniel Kim's platform he's used to both shape and predict outcomes at the same time. That becomes messy once we dive into it here. The stakeholders at hand are, in fact, Daniel Kim, who is trying to decide, should he shut this down? Should he keep moving forward? Runners, people that are running for office, like Alina Cruz, and the incumbent mayors and all that, and then the voters who are voting for office. And they should be well represented, and they shouldn't have to deal with suspicious outcomes and with the people placing bets and throwing tons of money on one person to be elected. That shouldn't be an issue, and we should care for those voters and their opinions, and it shouldn't be affected by people trying to make some money and trying to affect the outcome in their way because they have a ton of money to do that. And here we are. We're going to go to Eli to discuss the framework.
Appreciate that, T. So once again, we are responding to the case study of betting the outcome, and we are answering the question of what should Daniel do next. We would like to approach this case from a virtue ethics point of view. So just a little summary on virtue ethics for those who don't know. Virtue ethics is something that was primarily developed by Aristotle in the 4th century BC. And basically the idea is that you should always act virtuous. The definition of virtuous is kind of vague. What Aristotle says is that to act virtuous, you should act like someone else who's already virtuous, and then you kind of fake it till you make it. And the idea with virtue ethics is that there can be too much of a good thing. Aristotle describes it as we want to find the golden mean, describing there as a vice on either end. And so the main quality that we're looking at today through the lens of virtue ethics is efficiency. And so we believe that efficiency is inherently a good thing, but there can be too much efficiency. Specifically in this case, when the market feeds into an AI and the AI automatically responds to the market and spreading the advertisements and targeting certain audiences that could be vulnerable. And we believe that that is where the issue lies, is when AI actually amplifies that and we get out of the golden mean of efficiency. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Tripp.
Now I'll kind of talk about why we believe that the Kalshi or similar type system betting outcome on election markets are, allowed to be a thing still, but kind of removing the Daniel's tracking aspect that responds with AI itself to, do his campaigning. What I'd say is that also in a utilitarian lens, similar to virtue ethics, that the best outcome is the most informed market in a election campaign scenario with no delays. for sure, Gallup polls were created in the 40s and 50s, and before that, straw polls were things that kind of helped the voters or the Americans, I guess you could say, in this scenario, know who might win or who they should campaign more for. And I'd say having this system allows the campaigns to waste the least amount of money and focus their goals and what they want to get passed in their specific demographics happen easier. And also say Polymarket and Kalshi, two examples of this in our world, have successfully predicted market outcomes, while other major polls that have existed for a long time were missing or weren't fully correct as those two were. I'd also say on top of that, large donors, well, you may say this may manipulate or easily manipulatable rather than a large donor donating to like a super PAC or a campaign. In those same cases, they are, they're supporting a billboard, they're supporting an action. These betting markets will allow people like Daniel to see, okay, someone placed a large bet on us. Let's focus in on here. It's a very similar transaction in that way. I'd also like to draw a parallel to this, maybe for us sports guys, where you could say, think of it as an NBA player or coach manipulating his own betting, levels during the game. Daniel was basically the player or the coach, and he wanted to. His system that tracked the market was manipulating its own and responding to its level. So it was acting as like an intermediary, which should not ethically, as a basis of virtue, be morally correct, since it doesn't track an equal and fair free market, which we all kind of want in a democratic system. And now I'll pass it over to Hannah to just discuss more on counter arguments.
Yes, thank you everyone for being here. But so our answer to the question of what should Daniel do next is that we believe that the program that he has created should be allowed to continue, but that he should stop using the part of the AI that is targeting specific individuals and messaging them specifically. And so we believe that the forecasting part is okay, but not the shaping of the outcome. And so when we think about some alternate perspectives and some alternate ideas, one that we thought about is isn't the forecasting and the calls and everything that these people are getting the same thing as what they're seeing without AI, just like on social media or through other news outlets. This case specifically talks about pressure on journalists to report some falser outcomes in order to shape that. And we believe that the reporting the false outcomes is unethical, that is not truthful. And we believe that the use of the AI to target these people and find the undecided precincts and everything is the part of this model that is enabling those more unethical sides of the case, the shaping of the market. And so we believe that all in all, that is unethical, and that is the part of this question that is enabling that. Another counter argument we thought about is completely absolving the AI altogether. So is it the best choice just to disallow the betting market and the communication side of it as well? But we believe, like Tripp said with the Gallup polls and exit polls, those are already something that is ingrained in our society. And we believe that the information that they're providing to voters can be valuable in some scenarios. And so that we did not have an ethical problem with continuing. Another perspective is the perspective of power dynamics. So the large financial players that are engaging in these kind of predictive models and placing their bets in order to shape election outcomes are holding the power over the voters that are getting these messages. And I thought about a recent discussion about your right to your attention. And so like how much of your attention is your own commodity, I guess. So people that are interrupting you or all these messages and things that you're seeing, is that your right to have that? And so we thought that in this case, they are, by targeting them without their consent and without them saying that they wanted to get these messages, is kind of infringing on their right to attention as well. So finally, I'm going to pass it to Will to conclude.
So just to wrap up everything we've talked about in this presentation, we were given the question, what should Daniel do next with his prediction market? And so we looked at this through the framework of virtue ethics, and that doing the most virtuous action and finding that golden median is most important. So we think to find that golden median, well, yes, Daniel can keep his market up. He needs to not reach out to individual voters because that unfortunately sways the election in a way that is very unethical. Thank you so much, and we see the rest of our time.
Okay, thank you. Team A, Alabama, you have 2 minutes to confer. Judges, please score Team B, Auburn's presentation.
I just want to say, first of all, you guys made some really great points. I love the way you guys approach the situation. You thought about it in a way that I don't think we fully thought about. And so there's interesting perspectives, but we kind of want to respond to some of it, specifically what you guys talk about with Daniel's approach and kind of also the idea of the ethical frameworks that you guys looked at. One of the things I kind of want to hear more or challenge you guys more about is you guys are trying to balance utilitarianism and virtue ethics. And I think, virtue ethics, like you said, it's like the individual acting in a good, right way. And utilitarianism can sometimes be at odds with that because it's the most amount of good for the most amount of people, which is sometimes different than doing the right thing for oneself. It's doing the right thing for the most amount of people. So I just kind of want to hear more how you guys think that factors in to specifically this prediction market. And going off of that, I also kind of want to hear you touched on it a little bit, but this is ultimately affecting, right, politics, the people. It's this idea of democracy and that everyone gets a say. So if you're looking at it from a virtue standpoint or utilitarian standpoint, how do the prediction markets, or specifically, how does do you think targeting people with this AI takes away like that individual freedom to have a say in politics, or takes away that individual freedom to make decisions for yourself when these decisions are kind of being made for you? So I just want to hear you guys kind of touch on that. And then I know Tomas has some good points about kind of data usage and stuff like that. So
Yeah. We would like to ask, what would you guys consider the ethical ramifications of this AI being able to identify who is persuadable and who isn't? What are the implications of that, and what are the implications of that being used as a tool to be able to change outcomes towards like historically more less marginalized groups and away from from groups that are in fact marginalized?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say, I really appreciate what you guys said. I just wanted to look more about sort of, I think what polling is for and what sort of campaigning it should be for is for the people and for what bills and things like that will best benefit the people. And I just wanted to know what you guys thought about the idea of like, we don't know that AI is really benefiting that, right? AI works on probabilities, and that might not be what people are operating under. And maybe it is best for them in probability sense, but there's likely voters, populations who don't agree with that. So sort of how would this skew representation, basically, I think is what I want to ask. And I also wanted to clarify something, that in the case, I believe it said that Daniel used the campaign platform, not necessarily that he created it, but I think I can move it on to Jackson.
So I wanted to bring up that you guys defended the AI usage under utilitarianism because it helps campaigns know what they should be pushing, and that is kind of the benefit that it offers. But then towards the end, in your closing statements, you actually stated that swaying the election was not ethical. So how are you reconciling those in that using the AI to know what to push is ethical, but then actually pushing is unethical? And to talk more about utilitarianism, we're going to pass it to Sam.
Yeah, so once again, going back to kind of that idea, like you talked about with utilitarianism, we kind of already interrogated your idea there, but we also kind of want to look at like the most amount of good for the most amount of people. And I just think the point you said with bringing both frameworks of ethics together wasn't entirely clear, and I think we just want like a better outline of how you're using these frameworks to make these decisions. And also, I think what Ainsley was trying to get at too is this idea that if Daniel Kim isn't the person in charge, if he isn't the person upholding the whole platform, the question isn't as much as should he shut it down or not, but is him participating? And I'd actually love to ask this as a question, just out of curiosity: is Daniel participating in the platform itself unethical, right? Especially if it's not virtuous for him to get this data from individual people. Is that unethical? But then compare that to utilitarianism. If this is benefiting elections or benefiting the cycle, how do you compare those two frameworks? And is Daniel Kim's actions here, as he's doing currently, ethical? And just to end things out, I know talking about efficiency and some other things is Addison.
Thank you. Yeah, Eli, you had a good point about efficiency. You said it's a good thing, but too much of a good thing isn't so great. I wanted to ask to clarify more about that line of where that crosses. And also, I know you guys talked about getting rid of the messages, and that might be part of it. But if the AI is predicting in an incorrect direction, is that still efficient? Because you're still having to spend time realizing it's wrong or looking in the different direction. So how do you make that system more efficient?
Thank you, guys.
Team B, Auburn, you have 2 minutes to confer. Judges, please score Team A, Alabama's commentary. Auburn, please present.
All right, thank you, Team A, for helping us clarify this case. Like we said before, this case is clear as mud, so we hope that we helped clarify a little bit, and then you helped us out even further. So we're excited to dive deeper. You brought the tension between utilitarianism and virtue ethics. We want to go deeper into that. We want to clarify first, though, that we are using a virtue ethics framework through the lens of efficiency. So we want to dive deeper into that, and we're going to start with Eli down at the end here.
Yeah, so just a little clarification, and Trev is going to help me out on this. So from a broad view, we are using the virtue ethics framework. And I'll briefly, while I have the mic, I'll talk about the efficiency. Addison, I think that was a great point, asking where the line is for efficiency. And that's kind of the issue with virtue ethics, is that it can be kind of vague where both vices are for efficiency. Like efficiency in and of itself is a good thing. It keeps our society running. It's good that things are moving quickly and respond quickly. If things are going too slow, you're getting into slothfulness, like inefficiency, things not working well. And then when things are moving too fast, it doesn't have time for other parts of, like in this case, like the society, people's voting opinions to respond, and then not really representing themselves. And so I think from a virtue point of view, Aristotle said that to act virtuous, you kind of, if you don't know what to do, you act in a way that someone virtuous has acted, or in this case, you resemble a system that has worked well for a long time. I think the stock market is a good representation of this. The stock market has been, very efficient for a long time, and it responds instantly. The stock market is always changing, and so I think we can resemble the market for the election to the stock market, shown that the stock market works efficiently. That's kind of the efficiency level we need to shoot for, not past that. And now I'll pass to Trip.
And I'd say with the stock market example, beforehand, I'd say you'd have to make trades with maybe your broker a day of or a couple of days beforehand. Now they're trying to expand it to almost 24-hour trading to make it the most efficient market. And then what I say to what you guys talked about with the utilitarian versus virtue ethics, that's a great point to make, because I think it got taken out of context, because utilitarianism to me was to kind of a perspective on why the poly market or the betting on elections should exist and why that should be a thing, while the virtue ethics is focused on why Daniel's AI system that he used to track the different campaigns may be, the wrong thing to do in a democratic system where each person should have a personal, contribution to how, our elections should turn out. And I feel like I was just trying to explain why those things do exist.
Yeah, so I'm going to address a couple more of your questions. You talked about the ethical implications of being able to identify the people that are being targeted with these messages. And we think that's part of why that this targeted messaging is unethical, because they're using data that they might not have the consent or permission to collect without the people's knowledge. And so that could be another reason why it is unethical to continue with the shaping it sides of this AI platform. The other thing that you talked about is the probabilities versus the people. So the idea that this could skew the outcome of voting. And we already see that it is possible for polls to be incorrect. It is possible for a lot of things to skew the voting. And in this case, we believe that the betting is ethical because it is just the autonomy of the people to do what they would like with their money and their time, whereas the talking and sharing those outcomes is where it's infringing on other people's right to their attention and how that can be harmful for their right to vote.
Yeah, and so you also brought up the ethical ramifications of the predictive voter markets. That is super dangerous. That basically pushes our democracy into the hands of people with money. Like the line in here says, if you move the line, you move the narrative, and you move the vote. That is a very dangerous thing in our society, that if people have money, they can decide who wins elections just by spending it. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to T to wrap us up.
All right, we hope that was helpful to clarify our virtue ethics standpoint here and how we think utilitarianism fits in with a part of our argument, whereas we're looking at the main essential question, what should Daniel do next, through the lens of virtue ethics and efficiency. So we're thankful for your questions, and we're excited to dive farther. Thank you. We see our time.
Thank you. At this time, judges, please complete your scoring for their response, and we will move to the Q&A. Proceed to the Q&A now.
All right. Well, great job, team. And also, I did not say this on the previous one. You also did a very fabulous job on the last case. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. Let's talk a little bit more about Daniel. Even if Daniel did not place bets or anything into this platform, right? Is he ethically complicit in the system that's treating the market movement as both signal and lever? So is he ethically complicit, Daniel? Oh, sorry. It was ringing out on my phone. That treats market movement as both signal and the lever.
Yes, thank you so much for that question. So he is absolutely ethically complicit here. He is operating and distributing a platform that is directly affecting an election. So he is absolutely 100% ethically complicit in this case. He's doing nothing to stop it, and he's honestly influencing a market that has severe ramifications for people involved.
Yes, as Will just said, as the administrator and perpetuator of the system, we do believe that he is a big chunk of ethically responsible for any damage that the system is doing to the justice of the people who are kind of having their rights infringed upon to vote as they would like.
We did also do some research beforehand and did find out that Kalshi and Polymarket do ban or limit people who are inside campaigns to make these trades, since it's similar to like an insider trading aspect in the stock market, like Eli suggested before.
So since Daniel's acting as a political consultant and working on the housing referendum, so he's obviously being paid to do so, right? So do you, as far as a signal that he would need to move forward and go to do something, is he going to trust the model, or is he going to insert himself like human in the loop, is a common term used with AI? And then from that perspective, is he going to analyze data further and then take it back to his people to determine if this really is market movement, or is this just, inconsistent data that's coming out of the model?
I'd first respond to that and saying, like the other group was talking about, the markets or a poll could be incorrect. So letting him be the deciding factor, or the group around him being paid to do this, is a way, maybe more human way and more democratic way to apply to this process.
I also think, in response to your question, the idea of human in the loop, we really want to see human in command instead of human in the loop. So we want the human aspect to be the central part instead of the AI making decisions without any oversight, because we believe that could be very dangerous.
Hey, one more time. Great job, everybody. Very, very impressed. So my question is, it's tangential to the topic, but it's definitely on the topic. You mentioned that polls have been around for a long time, and so we didn't see any problem with that societal norm continuing with Daniel's product. But my real question is, are polls a good idea or not? Do polls change people's opinions before they even had a chance to make them? And should there be a societal change? We change things all the time. Should there be a change where polling is not allowed or not allowed day of, or any piece of that?
I'd first respond by saying polling is a great opportunity for voters to get a stance on where who they want to vote for is, and I'd also say that we're quickly making a transition where Washington Post and similar newspapers are more heavily focusing on volume market and the betting outcomes rather than polling and traditional polling. And I feel like there is just a societal switch into what we're believing and trusting. It's definitely been a radical change compared to what traditional polling was. I did also note that in the 20s, this betting on outcomes actually occurred in New York City, and they were scared to change and scared to move into this new future that maybe we could have as a American democracy, and maybe now is the perfect time for that. They did evidently stop it and continue traditional polling, but I think that they didn't realize its full opportunities that could be used, like we talked about.
I do think the question on is polling even like applicable or ethical itself is an interesting way to approach this, because there is definitely a tendency for a mass of people to or for people individually to follow the mass. Like if you're kind of split and you see everybody make a decision towards a certain, say, political party or opinion, there's definitely a tendency to just kind of go with that, especially if you're split, you do what your friends do, that type of idea. And I think that's where the poly markets are like shifting to, is that now people have to back it with their money, as they're not only voicing their opinion, but they're putting their money behind it. And issues will arise with that as well. But
I'd say with their money behind it, wouldn't that encourage them to vote and get the person that they may have placed the money on to win, or to participate in the political process to allow maybe whoever they chose to win the election?
I think going back to your question, the idea of is polling ethical, we were kind of thinking about that from a frame of autonomy. So everyone has the autonomy to go and tell your best friend who you voted for, and that in and of itself could sway that person. And so with people who are consenting to tell someone from a newspaper or a news outlet who they voted for, we don't believe that that is doing more harm than it would be to restrict the autonomy of the people to give their opinion and have that information.
And with that in mind, we see that this AI-driven outreach and prediction market would be a more efficient version of polling, like we just said. Whereas we do need to be careful and not go too far as we align in our virtue ethics framework. So we thank you for that question.
Thank you, Team Alabama, Team Auburn. Judges, if you'll take this time now, complete your score sheets and let me know when you're done. Okay, at this time, the judges will announce their scores.
Okay, thank you guys again. I thought you all were great. And your scores came out very, very, very close. Ended up with 46 for Alabama and 47 for Auburn. Thank you.
So for Team A, Alabama, I scored 54. Good job. And also for Team B, Auburn, I scored 50. But good job. You guys did really well.
Okay, and then for me, for Alabama, you had a total of 51 points. And then for Auburn, you had a total of 53 points.
Thank you. So with the score from the judges, Team Auburn has won the bronze medal match. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.